When I was 16 years old, I had the greatest job in the world. I was a counselor at Camp Cherry Pine. It was the best summer of my life until the last week of August. That's when Ben Posley was murdered. And it was my fault. Ben was a hurricane that had somehow gotten stuffed into the body of an 11-year-old boy. He was curious and clever, wild and fearless. While Ben was a camper at Cherry Pine, he came up with a nickname for each counselor. He called me Calico because I avoided the water. "Calico, why don't you jump in?" he asked, splashing me from the river. I pulled my towel up for protection and scooted my chair towards the middle of the dock. "Splash me again, Ben Posley, and you'll be cleaning up the camp toilets with a toothbrush. And no more bug juice with dinner. You'll get water. River water." Ben grinned and swam back towards his friends out on the float. I stuck my tongue out. I wasn't always the most professional counselor, but I loved the kids. Loved watching them explore the forest and become friends and grow into stronger people each summer. Most of all, though, I loved scaring them at the campfire. There are 6 legends that haunt Camp Cherry Pine. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about the most dangerous. Jensen's hand shot up. I sighed. "Miss Becca?" he asked me. "Is this a true story?" I moved the flashlight under my chin. "Yes, this is the true story of the Devil's Clearing." Jensen squirmed back against his log. Several of the campers glanced around at each other, small shadows jittering in the campfire light. Each week I told the kids one of Cherry Pine's legends. The night that I told them about the clearing was the last Sunday before camp ended. I held court before the fire, sitting on my favorite stump, sneaking bites from my s'mores whenever I paused in the story. The clearing has existed in these woods since before Camp Cherry Pine was built. It was here before any human eye saw the evergreens and the fir trees and the rivers here. Devil's Clearing has always existed, and will be here long after we are all. "Where is it?" Ben asked, barely more than a pair of eyes reflecting firelight from deep inside a hoodie. The location of the clearing changes constantly. You'll never find it on a map. You'll never find it at all unless you're supposed to. Little Lucy Carter waved her hand. "Miss Becca, but what if you flew over the forest in a plane? Would you see the clearing?" "Hey, Calico, what about a satellite?" I tossed a few more branches onto the fire. They erupted with a crack. "Neither would work, dear campers. The clearing disguises itself. It can hide in plain sight. And it's always moving, like an octopus or one of those leaf bugs that can blend in around plants." "Katydids," Ben said. "If you say so, smarty pants." Ben didn't reply. He was withdrawn into his jacket watching the fire. I recognized that as his thinking face. I hesitated. The Devil's Clearing was my favorite story, one the senior counselors used to scare newbies every summer. The clearing had a way of sinking hooks into the curious. I went looking my first year but never found it. There were times I felt close, alone at night in the forest after sneaking out. There are shadows that can only exist in the woods in summer, warm, dark spots that could hide anything. I shivered and considered stopping the story, but all eyes were on me. Even David's eyes, the other counselor helping me run the fire. And his eyes were so blue they looked like cracked little pieces of sky. I wanted to keep those eyes, that attention, so... "What's so bad about the clearing?" Lucy asked. "Nobody ever comes out the same," I said. "Most don't come out at all. Devils dance in the clearing under the moonlight. They call the rain and it burns as it falls, bites right into the trees. They call the thunder, and when it cracks you can hear the day you'll die in the sound. The clearing chews on some and eats others, and keeps the ones it cares for most." The campers were silent. There was only the fire and the sound of the forest. Raccoons and mice skittered across the leaves. The whoosh drop of owls finding them. "How do you find the clearing?" Ben asked. "You don't," I said, finishing my s'more. "If you have something it wants, it'll find you. If you're ever in the woods and all the sounds stop and the sun freezes in the sky, and you end up seeing an opening in the trees that calls to you. More silence. "What do we do?" Jensen whispered. "You run!" The camper screamed as I jumped up, shaking my hands and rattling my flashlight. Everybody was scared except for Ben. He stayed seated, resting against his log, watching the fire. David helped collect everyone after they settled down. "Good story, Calico," he said with a wink. "Don't you start with that Calico bull stuff," I said. I felt very warm and very present right there under the stars. Someone cleared a small throat. "Oh, Ben, why are you sneaking around back there in the shadows?" He stepped out from the tree where he was clearly hiding. "I wasn't hiding. I thought maybe you'd want to help putting the fire out." "All right." Ben was efficient with cleanup, making sure the embers were soaked, then buried, all by the book. It took him about 5 minutes to finally ask me the question that was riding him. "Is clearing real, Calico?" "It's just a story, Ben." He paused. "It feels real." "I know. I'll tell you a secret. When I first started here years ago, I went looking for the Devil's Clearing. But it's just a legend, Ben." "I think I've seen it. The start of it. I don't know what it was. Some nights I sneak out." "Ben." "Sorry. Not a lot. Just when David's watching us because he's too busy texting some girl." I felt my stomach drop, but kept a stone face. "That's really not okay, Ben. It's dangerous. Promise you'll stop." "Sure." "Ben." No, I swear." He crossed his heart. "But Calico, I did see the clearing. Some nights I would come to an opening in the trees, and the forest would go quiet. The stars would stop in the sky, and something would tug. I always ran. I didn't know." "It's just your imagination, Ben." He looked at me square, my flashlight catching his expression. "Calico, why don't you look again?" "I don't think I even want to find out if it's real." "Oh," Ben said, looking out at the silhouette of the nearest trees. "That makes sense." I led Ben back to the cabins, trying to ignore the pressure between my shoulder blades, the feeling of being watched. The walk home was silent. I considered mentioning Ben's little jailbreaks to David, but didn't want to make him feel bad about it. Instead, I made Ben promise me that he'd stop his nighttime excursions. 2 nights later, he went missing. We all searched when he didn't show up for morning chow. The whole camp, then the cops. Then the entire town went through the forest root by root and needle by needle, from dawn until after dark. My group didn't find what was left of Ben, but we were close enough to hear the screams. I ran towards the sound, thinking maybe he was alive. Hurt, scared, alone. It would have been better if I was slower. They found pieces of Ben nailed to a cluster of trees arranged in a rough circle. I saw all of it, all that was done to him. His face. I saw it. I was sick for a long time after that. Camp Cherry Pine shut down permanently. Who wants to send their kid to a camp where a camper was... Who wants to risk what happened to Ben happening to their son or daughter? Once I was able to hold down food again and stopped sleeping all day, I became occupied with a need to go look for myself. I was staying with my parents not even an hour from Cherry Pine. One night, I copied Ben and snuck out. I put my mom's pickup in neutral and rolled it down our driveway to the road before turning on the ignition. Camp Cherry Pine was closed for less than a month at that point, but looked like a corpse years into its rot. I parked in the gravel lot and took a long breath. Fall hadn't arrived. The night was still balmy, but I couldn't shake a chill. I climbed over the chain, closing the camp off, and set off into the woods. I noticed the quiet immediately. It wasn't that the silence was everywhere. No, it was clearly behind me, moving with me like a wake. or a stalker. Initially, I followed familiar paths, twisting off into the wild. The farther I went, the more I stepped away from trails and pressed into the bramble. Leaves brushed my face, and roots dogged my steps. More than once, I felt the ladder snap at my foot. Soon, I was lost. The moon was heavy over everything, soft burning shadows onto the forest floor. My flashlight was shaking, though I thought my arm was fine. There was a break in the trees ahead. I felt a tug when I slipped into the opening. The clearing was wide, flat, green. Sunlight swept the tall grass and... Sunlight? I took a step forward. There was no sound, no breeze, no birds. How was the sun out in the middle of the night? The air had a taste. It was sour or bitter. I was struggling to breathe. The sun began to dip and soar. The silence was replaced by a roar. Noise so complete it pushed out the rest of the world. It hurt. But I still wanted to take another step into the clearing. Calico, why don't you turn around? Ben's voice cut through the fear. The clearing's pull was still there, but I stumbled back. I tripped over roots, landed hard, crawled away. I kept crawling, and soon it was night again, and I heard the usual forest sounds. After I don't know how long, I got up and ran until I hit the camp. Then I drove home. My parents never noticed, never knew. That was almost 20 years ago. I've tried to put it out of my mind. I read about Camp Cherry Pine and accidents that should have been warnings. Missing kids, sickness. I've read about it but never gone back. I always knew the clearing was waiting if I did. But now it's here. I feel it on my step. A silence that follows. Some nights I catch a glimpse of it at the end of alleys. Other times I know that if I take a left, I'll drive until the road narrows and I see a wide, green, flat place. So far I've been able to resist that tug. Every time, it's stronger. I woke up to the overwhelming smell of pine needles. The room was dark, pre-dawn light struggling to limp through the shades. It was warm and getting warmer. A songbird called out. I sat up in bed. There was a bright glow under the closet door. A draft, a breeze, brushed out from the closet and cooled the sweat that was breaking out on my arms and neck. Ever since this started, my whole life has felt barely a step ahead of something awful. The air in the bedroom was humid and tasted like flowers. The light under the closet grew brighter, as shadows began to split and divide in the rest of the room. "Leave," I whispered, jamming my eyes shut. "Please leave." For a moment, the heat and light were unbearable. Then it was gone. My bedroom was normal again. I slid under the covers, feeling a new chill. The encounters were happening more frequently. I saw hints of the clearing behind doors, buildings, or off in the horizon. Each day it became more clear, and each day the pull got harder to resist. One day soon, I knew I wouldn't be able to look away again. "You have another nightmare?" Kate asked. "Yep," I lied. "The camp again?" "Yeah." We were getting ice cream at a spot down by the beach. The boardwalk was sparse. All of the weekenders wouldn't be down until Friday, and the real summer crowds were still a month away. I was plopped on a bench overlooking the ocean. Kate sat on the seawall, the wind pulling at her short hair, which she'd recently dyed electric blue and black. I tugged at a loose strand of my own curly hair. Dyeing it might be nice, but I was struggling just to get out of my apartment for anything other than work. "Would you like to try mine?" Kate asked. Is it cookie dough again? I'll pass. You really need to expand your horizons. Kate stuck out her tongue. I need to expand? When was the last time you went out? Whatever happened to that guy you were talking to, the writer? I didn't answer. I'd stopped paying attention. I was too busy watching the ocean slowly turning green. Chunks of tangled grass and flowers washed up on a shore in a ragged line. Waves of dirt crashed without a sound. The entire beach was silent and quickly filling with greenery. Trees sprouted from the sand. Calico. The voice was familiar but wrong. It resembled someone I used to know in the same way that a corpse resembles the person that used to wear the body. I felt a horrible tug towards the beach. A psychic riptide. Someone nearby was screaming. Hands covered me, grabbing, pulling, tearing. Jesus, what's wrong? Kate asked. I sat up. I'd fallen from my bench onto the boardwalk. Sand and rough wood nipped at my legs. What happened? I asked. Kate knelt over me, checking me for bruises. You just screamed and collapsed on the boards. Then you started crawling towards the beach. Once you hit the seawall, you just curled up and sobbed for a minute. I looked around. A small crowd was gathering in a semicircle with Kate and me in the middle. Oh. Did I make a scene? I'm sorry if I did. Kate winced. She handed me a napkin. You got some... I reached up and felt something wet on my chin. I licked my lips and tasted metal. Kate's napkin came away red when I pressed it to my nose. Fuck, I muttered, trying to ignore the slim blades of grass quickly growing up through the boardwalk. I knew no one else would see them. I managed to hide in my apartment for a few weeks with no incidents. Then one night I woke up standing on my balcony, looking down into an empty expanse of green. The field, the clearing, stretched away across the city, infinite and warm. There were no stars in the sky above it. There was a red moon or something like it. It hurt to look at. Calico, why don't you... No, I shouted, stepping back towards my window. Why won't you leave me alone? Fuck off! Go the hell away! I bumped into the glass. Just leave! Go away! No. Hands shot out from below my balcony. Dozens of hands, young and old, smooth and battered. Long arms wrapped around me, cold fingers pushed into my throat and pulled at my limbs. I tore myself away and hit the window so hard the glass shook in the frame. I clawed at the windowsill until finally it lifted and I crawled back into my apartment. Some pressure lifted and I lay on the floor for several minutes, panting. My eyes were closed. If I couldn't see the clearing, I wondered if it would let me go. Fresh red bruises in the shapes of fingers covered my neck and my arms. The clearing was physically trying to take me now. After all of these years. Why? I spent the rest of the night in my kitchen, marathoning my way through 3 pots of coffee to stay awake. Once the sun was up, there was a long drive waiting. It was time for me to face the clearing where I saw it for the first time years ago. Maybe burn the fucker down. Camp Cherry Pine looked like shit. I drove the entire morning and pulled up to the gravel road just before lunch. The camp sign was weathered down to the nub and hung from one rusted chain above the gate. Comforting, I said, leaving my car in the lot and immediately heading off towards the tree line. I didn't want to hesitate. I might talk myself out of my terrible idea. And I definitely didn't want to wait too long and run any risk of being in the woods at night. The trail was clear, easy to follow. I left shallow footprints in the dry dirt. It didn't take long for the forest to notice me. Whippoorwills called my passing to each other like operators at a switchboard. Less than an hour from the camp entrance, I noticed roots growing through the path. They reminded me of veins, wet and twisting, and so easy to trip over. I was shaking then, but not ready to turn around. Not ready to wait for the clearing to find me. This would happen on my time. My decision. There was a break in the trees ahead. I pushed through to find myself staring up at a sky so full of stars it was blinding. A white expanse with only drops of black. And silence. I fell to my knees and closed my eyes. Eventually, the light outside my lids faded and I risked a glance. The sky was dark and skyless. There was an orange glow coming from the middle of the clearing. 3 figures danced around the fire. I could barely see them through the smoke and shadow, but they looked large. Bloated and sleek as overfed leeches. So pale I doubted they'd ever met the sun. The trio dipped, jittered, linked arms, and shook together. Watching them move, I felt a sick dread pulling me towards the creatures.
Calico, why don't you come over?
Ben's voice, but not Ben's voice. Something wearing Ben's voice. It sounded like him, but spoken from the far end of a tunnel during a rainstorm. Ben?
Fire's warm, come over.
The figures had stopped dancing and stood watching me, silhouettes in the smoke. They hummed like fallen live wires or a nest before the wasps pour out.
Leave me alone,
I said, voice breaking. No more. No more.
Dance with us.
Why are you doing this? Why now?
Doors are opening, places getting thin. Locks fall away. It'll only get worse. You've seen. You've been seen.
I was curled on the grass. This was a mistake. The pull was horrible, like being stuck in a microwave. I don't want to see you anymore. Go away. I'm sorry I couldn't help you, Ben, but I just want to be left alone.
You've seen.
No.
You have.
I don't want to, I shouted. Wind ripped at my exposed skin. Something dragged me forward a few feet, then stopped. Leave me alone.
You see us. See? See?
The car keys were in my front pocket. I didn't use a key. Almost, but I had enough presence of mind to remember the small pocket knife I kept on my keychain. The first cut hurt more than every other moment of pain I'd felt before in my life, all rolled together. The second cut wasn't much better. Or the third. Fourth. I didn't count for long. The blade was small and dull and efficient. In less than a minute, I made sure I couldn't see the clearing again. The wind stopped. Forest sounds returned. And the sound of me shrieking. I let it all out. It was a very good thing that I'd brought my phone. There's no way I would have made it back to my car like that in the dark. I called for help and they found me. Moved me, did what they could to heal me. You won't ever see again, but there are ways we can help you navigate life, the doctors told me. That's fine, I replied, bandaged but free. Still, some nights I lie awake in bed, in the black, and I feel a breeze, and I smell summer, and I wonder if I'm really done. Thanks everyone for watching tonight's video, listening to tonight's story. The story today was written by Travis Brown. You can also find their work on Reddit under their profile Grand Theft Motto. And check out their works on Amazon. There's House with 100 Doors, as well as How to Build a Haunted House. Unforgettable Tales by Travis Brown. You can find his work on his website as well, Travis Brown Writing. And please support the author and let him know Jordan Grupe Horror sent you. Today's video was supported by patrons like Mark from Earth, Crimson Muse, Joy Burton, Diane Showers, Mark Sewall, Cheryl James, Pick Your Sticker, Teddy Dog, Clue 404, Mamakato, Dante Kincaid, Zarin Ray, Angela Donovan, Blarian 50, Devin Kyle, Timothy Baird, Ajeti, Bert Turner, Bajani Espinal, Michael Pierce, Big Joe, Carrie Harkonnen, LaDonna Spivey, Scott Tanaka. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in the next Hollow's End story. Links to join are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. See you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.